Hey, John.
Sharon Waxman, hello. How's it going there at TheWrap?
Good. I want to talk about Rupert Murdoch and this parliamentary commission that ripped him limb from limb this week. What do you think about that?
You and everybody else wants to talk about this. The thing that caught my eye was the British Parliament suggesting that they have the power to rule who is fit to run what they called an international organization. Of course, News Corp, a transnational media empire. The question really is, does an individual government have the power to pull that off? Certainly they have leverage over Rupert Murdoch. They have licensing issues with B-Sky B, and then certainly they're going to push that as much as they possibly can. There are also issues here in the United States. If the phone hacking scandal comes across the Atlantic, the U.S. government and the FCC can mess with his FCC licenses.
Right.
But basic question, I think, is unanswered. Can an individual country decide who's fit to run a transnational? The transnationals would say, hey, we decide who governs us.
Well, they did. Yeah, they declared him not fit to run his media empire. But in fact, then his board then came back and said, no, we unanimously support Rupert Murdoch, which they keep on saying, which is not very surprising. But then we did a story that looked at what are the legal implications for him in the United States. And as you say, there are his FCC licenses. And there is also this investigation into the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that is going to look at whether the hacking thing might have impacted some of his American properties. So, let's also talk about the whole public relations issue. I mean, this does ultimately start eroding the brand of the company. If people don't trust Rupert Murdoch, if people don't trust what News Corp represents, then that's very damaging. You don't think that that's a part of the whole package going on here?
The question of damaging is separate, it seems to me, from whether this is a level playing field for governments versus giant media organizations. Yes, Murdoch's got problems, and the ability of individual governments to harass a company like News Corp is well known and is going to definitely continue. But the idea of who gets to decide who governs these transnational companies, that's a question that seems to me it's the transnationals that have the upper hand here. Mm-hmm. They're not, and because you can find situations where certain countries might say Rupert Murdoch is fit to run this company, and shareholders go, yes, that's our brand. Our brand is being tough and standing up to individual nations. And some of these conglomerates have the power and the clout to pull it off.
Well, isn't that something that's been going on for quite a long time? I mean, you were bringing up, as we were talking earlier, that these were tactics that were pioneered by Standard Oil, in terms of whether their interests are those served by the country where they're based, or if they have their own interests, almost like a sovereign nation unto themselves.
Old story. In fact, ExxonMobil, Google, they all have foreign policy arms within the corporations. Mm-hmm. And it's an old story in the sense that Standard Oil brought oil and energy to this world. And John D. Rockefeller said, hey, we are improving the lot of Americans. And that was true until the clout of this corporation, as it grew bigger and bigger and bigger, meant that when the bottom line came to deciding whether we're going to, bring light to Americans or evade taxes in various states, the bottom line rules.
Bottom line, well, that goes right. That's just what exactly. So there was this really interesting investigative piece the New York Times did earlier this week about how Apple is evading billions of dollars in taxes every year by basing itself in Reno, Nevada. And then, of course, that's a classic 21st century transnational, multinational, whatever you want to call it. They manufacture in China. They distribute all over the world. They're tap dancing around their taxes, especially here in California. It's extremely damaging where the state's got no money, as I'm sure you know. So it's sort of interesting how that is in tension, I think, what's going on there with the values that the company, especially a company like Apple, likes to represent themselves as forward-looking and hip and liberal and, we want to change the world. They're very forward-looking and progressive.
They're just playing the game. And the game is, if we're bigger than the state of California, then we're not going to hand over any money that we don't believe we owe to the state of California. If there's a way we can game the system to keep it from happening, tax evasion is a felony, but using the transnational system to dodge the sovereignty of nations, that's an old story, and the laws are going to have to catch up with this.
Right. Let's go back to you. We brought up China before, so now you were interested in talking about Chen Guangchen, who's now created all kinds of problems between the United States and China. What's your thought on that story?
hold the presses. Here's the story. Marvel Studios has declared Cheng, this blind, self-taught Chinese law student, as the 10th Avenger. I'm telling you, he has done U.S.-China relations with a cell phone and a couple of news conferences wearing a Nike jacket is revolutionary, and we're going to see a lot more of it. It's extraordinary to me.
You're saying that this is just one person who can basically tip the balance of the two superpowers. That is what's going on basically at the box office this weekend. Just to bring it back around, The Avengers, since you made reference to it, Disney's movie is opening crazy big all around the world. It's going to probably break 1 million box office records. It's opened abroad already, China, India, Brazil, all over. It's made already $250 million. And it already made another $20 million in midnight screenings last night. It's going to probably make about $500 million by Monday.
If Disney can prove that movie consumers of the 21st century are going to collect movies and DVDs and entertainment properties the way they used to collect comic books and have huge stacks of them in their closets, that's a gigantic profit center.
I couldn't agree more. All right, John Hockenberry, thank you so much for joining me. Talk to you later.
Sharon, have a great weekend.
You too.